Beneath the overworld lies a shattered realm, a place integral to the functioning of reality as we know it, now left as a shadow of its true self. Here, fragments of its former denizens shamble through their raised fortresses, remnants of powerful magic lingering in the wafer-thin fabric of existence. A once great civilization clinging to the edge of reality, now reduced to crumbling ruins, and all because a doorway was opened that should have forever stayed shut. Below the world as we know it, stretching out to the far lands and beyond, lies a whole other reality. The foundation of the overworld, a dimensional canvas on which the whole of existence is painted, the Nether. Here, space and time are condensed to such an extent that great distances in the overworld can be traversed in mere steps. The Nether is no abyss, however, devoid of land or air, but a realm of elemental fire, the forge from which the world was crafted. Within, its creatures, not unlike those that would one day be found in the overworld, emerged from the primordial flames. They saw the barren land before them, replete with molten rock and flames, which burned across vast fields of netherrack. Some called the material bloodstone, and claimed that it was alive, that the Nether was one large organism, and that this is where they had emerged from, not the flame after all. There was nothing else here, and they had to do what they could, despite the objections of a vocal few. Even with some claiming that they were torturing the greater organism. In time, the raw netherrack would be refined into robust building material. With this nether brick, they were able to construct large and imposing bridges that spanned the burning vistas, converging at points into hubs that grew and became the center of their society. These were the Nether fortresses. What more was there though? What else could be done in this limited reality? The people of the Nether turned to experimentation, investigating in excruciating detail every facet of their existence, soon becoming masters over the world, and eventually the weavers of life. From the netherrack and flame they were able to birth flying monstrosities that some insisted were portions of the greater Nether being's soul. They believed that where the weavers had willingly left the greater whole, these new creatures were unwillingly ripped away, becoming restless ghasts with no other purpose than to merely exist. In time it would be discovered that the fabric of reality itself could be manipulated, and the weavers set to forming a better world for themselves, one where there was infinite variety, and they could break free of their monotonous existence. They experimented with their new reality warping techniques, and managed to create vegetation, something that had never occurred in the Nether before. The Netherwart was twisted though, and had taken on the properties of the world in which it was created, ending up no different to anything else in the Nether. Still, it was progress, and the weavers were not deterred. In order to achieve something truly unique, they would have to simply warp the thin fabric of being even more, only this ended up being too much. As that thin fabric tore, the weavers saw a glimpse of what they had created before the rifts sealed, leaving them in their own world that they knew all too well. It had been a lush world with colours the weavers had never seen before, blues and greens and places beyond anything they could have ever imagined. It seemed like a place that different was entirely incompatible with the Nether, and their experiments had inadvertently created a pocket dimension atop their own. Little had they realised that this new dimension was already expanding, and would continue to do so for an eternity, until it would literally tear itself apart. Again, the weavers were not put off. In a way, they had succeeded. They had created their perfect world. They just needed to get to it now. For an age, they tried everything they could to reach their paradise, but for all their reality-twisting skills, this was beyond them. It was cosmic irony then that they had exactly what they needed to create a portal, bar one key component. They had lava and fire in abundance, but water, the lone ingredient that would complete the portal, was a concept completely alien to the Nether. While the weavers' experiments progressed, the overworld saw an emergence of life of its very own, a whole array of creatures in shapes and sizes unthought of previously. As they developed, the intelligence of the creatures grew exponentially. Whereas the weavers had all but stagnated in a world devoid of stimulation, the overworld had flourished, and soon a being of such intelligence as to rival the weavers would arise. They would quickly build their very own civilization, becoming builders and weavers themselves. They would harness the power of the world they had been given, but just like the beings who had indirectly created them, this reality was not enough. Even with the vast variety of luxuries and freedom they had been granted, they wanted more. It was now they experimented with bending reality, peering through the veil of existence. They combined many different materials in many different arrangements, and eventually stumbled upon a simple ordering of elemental substances that opened a gateway to a realm beyond. This realm was of course the Nether, and it would become of great interest to the peoples of the overworld. At first, small expeditionary teams were sent through the portal to assess the viability of this new place for colonization. All they reported back was that it was a hellscape of fleshy rock, molten rivers, and giant screaming beasts that hung in the air, spitting balls of fire at anyone who approached too closely. Even though it was new land for the taking, this place was more danger than it was worth, and the expeditions were about to be called off, when word returned of great structures that towered high over the lava plains. Only an intelligent mind could conceive of such an architectural feat, and suddenly the Nether had value to the overworlders. They dared not approach too closely to the structures, for this new world had already proven itself time and again to be deadly to the reckless. Further teams were sent through with the materials to set up a forward base, complete with its own portal home. With this they may study the indigenous beings with greater ease, and in due course make contact. Upon the first use of the portal though, something happened that no one had expected. It was planned that upon their return through the new portal, the team would mark their location so that an adjoining base could be constructed in the overworld. Rather than exit where it had been predicted they would, the return team found themselves much further away from their home base than they had anticipated, further even than they had travelled within the Nether. The distance was so far in fact, that transporting the materials for the new base was now a significantly greater undertaking. It was quickly deduced that space must be somehow condensed within the Nether, so that the distance traversed in that realm is greatly exaggerated within the overworld. Contact with a new race of creatures was now not the only value the Nether had, and immediately opportunistic parties set to designing how to best exploit this feature. In short order, the ratio of distances between the overworld and the Nether had been extrapolated, maps drawn up matching major social hubs with their Nether locations. Even as observation of the natives continued, work had begun creating transport links using the Nether as some sort of interdimensional subway system. The interlopers' activity had not gone unnoticed by the Weavers, however, and they were greatly angered by the developments, but also excited by the presence of the portals. At last the gateway to the world they had created existed, and they may finally be able to escape their imprisonment within this realm. First they would need to deal with the overworlders and their technology, and it was clear that there was only one way to deal with an infestation like that. In their fortresses the Weavers set to doing what they were best at, and endeavoured to create a new form of life, one that would be capable of purging the unwelcome visitors. They intertwined their own essence with the flames that forever burnt around them, and a creature of retribution, not just for the Weavers, but for the whole of the Nether was born. Without even a first contact between the peoples, the Weavers set their fiery abomination loose on the overworlders' observation outpost. The fact that the invaders had come into the Nether and did whatever they pleased was enough contact for a majority of Weavers to want to see them all slaughtered. This was especially true of the fanatics, who still believed their world to be a living organism, and that the visitors were killing it with their industrialization. The flaming creature tore through the outpost, killing everyone it encountered, and attempted to traverse the portal, travelling to the overworld. Upon arriving, something terrible happened though. As it always had been, the Nether and the overworld were inherently incompatible, and as soon as the sun touched the creature, it detonated in a tremendous explosion, which levelled everything for miles, including the portal it had come through. The armies of the overworld mobilized as quickly as they could, but already their bases in the Nether had been assaulted by more of these blazing creatures, and soon the transit hubs were also assaulted, resulting in the blazes emerging into city centers, where, just like the first, they would explode with the force of many kilotons of TNT, obliterating the city and everyone in it. Despite city after city being wiped from the map, with incalculable life lost, and the overworld's armies dwindling before they could even launch a counterattack. After the devastation wrought in the short but world-changing Blaze War, the cities of the overworld were left in ruins. Millions were dead and civilization as it had been known was virtually extinguished. The survivors were persistent, however, and rallied together to come up with a new plan. All of the portals to the Nether had been destroyed bar one, and through that single portal may still come another attack that threatened to wipe out the overworlders in their entirety. They couldn't risk it remaining open, but neither could they risk that those on the other side had not learnt how to create one for themselves, and so it was that the survivors knew at once what must be done. They had to return to the Nether, reduce anything they encountered to dust. This was no longer a war for territory or expansion rights, but for survival. How could they carry out an operation like that though? Everything they knew had been wiped away, their technology obliterated. that was other than a few secret installations based far away from the zones of destruction, high up in the mountains or deep below the ground. Most were munition storage sites or research centres for experimental technology, all but useless now there was barely enough power left to fuel them anymore, let alone anyone to wield them. There was one site though, a genetic research laboratory that had once been the topic of great controversy due to the ethically questionable experiments that took place there. But ethics were hardly a concern at this point, and that site may just be the single hope for all surviving overworlders. Here experiments were conducted on animals, altering their genetic makeup in wild and bizarre ways. There were even rumours that they had attempted to bind overworlder DNA to that of the test subjects. Some called it a Frankenstein operation, but at this point that was the exact kind of thing that was needed. Working from a limited supply of renewable power, the installation had no objection when they received word to begin attempting to clone volunteer soldiers in an effort to quickly raise an army to invade the Nether. The work was hurried, conducted without the usual scientific considerations experiments were typically given. Even so, they made sure to get it right, for a fault in the clones would only lead back to their inevitable annihilation. Despite the care taken, something was still amiss. For all their efforts, they had never actually managed to create a functioning clone, and as it transpired, they would not succeed now. The structure of an overworlder's DNA was just too complex. A new approach was required, one that would break every ethical line they had not already crossed. The overworlder's genome was too difficult to map, especially with such limited time, so they needed a simpler structure to embed within the basic overworlder template. There were any number of animals that could potentially fill the role for this template, but only one that shared huge genetic similarities with the overworlders: the humble pig. The scientists would gather up all the pigs they possibly could, with many of them having been killed just like their overworlder counterparts in the blasts. Luckily, there was still a significant amount that could be worked with, and after a number of unsuccessful trials, it was found that an augmented virus was the most efficient way to begin the genetic change within the pigs. Therefore, pens of hundreds and sometimes thousands of them would be gathered together, and a compound would be released, infecting them all at once. Then, in small groups, they would be brought to specially constructed chambers, where the introduction of a high-voltage shock would accelerate their metamorphosis into a loyal creature with the stature of an overworld, but the features and intelligence of a pig. Unfortunately, something again must have gone wrong, because after a mere few hours the pigmen's bodies began to break down, revealing bone and muscle that rapidly began to decay. What's more is that in the rush to create these abominations, the containment pens had not been sealed properly, and a virus had managed to spill out into the open, potentially infecting every pig it encountered. This, though, was hardly a consideration at the moment, as despite their literally rotting bodies, the pigmen were still functional, and so each was prepared to be sent through one of the dozens of Nether portals currently under construction. Seeing as virtually all technology had been destroyed and traditional metal mines had collapsed after the world-ending detonations, the overworlders were forced to salvage any and all of their most precious metals, preferably gold, as it was easy to mold and forge into weaponry that could be given to the pigmen. After everything, the death, the destruction, the remnants of the overworld would have their invasion, and it may very well be the last thing they ever did. In short order, portals began opening all over the Nether, more than the Weavers had ever seen, and out of them began to pour a seemingly unending stream of half-rotten, mutated creatures, wielding poorly forged or half-broken swords. The creatures were easy to kill, but their numbers were immeasurable, too many for the Weavers to contend with, and so casualties on both sides began to mount. Thousands became tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and more still. Deep within the Nether fortresses, the Weavers had been working hard, attempting to find a solution to their condition, a way in which they could travel to the overworld and survive. But it was no good. The soul of a single Weaver could simply not withstand the strains of their reality. But then it occurred to the Weaver scientists. What if they left their souls within the Nether? Their body could travel to the overworld, and so long as the portal was kept open, they could maintain a remote link to their safely stored souls. The concept was, of course, pure insanity, but with the mutants of the overworld bearing down on them, there were no other options. The process was tested on a few of their own kind, and as expected, their soul was stripped from their body, but so too was their flesh, leaving an animate skeleton and a pile of sand made up of atomized body parts that housed the soul. Apparently it still needed something of the body in order to continue existing after all. At first the result was horrifying, but quickly the Weavers saw that they had succeeded. Not exactly in the way they'd expected, but nonetheless it had worked. Quickly, the procedure was offered to the entire population, with the vast majority reluctantly going through with it, and started towards the single secured Nether portal, knowing that to stay would surely mean to be overrun by the pigmen. Initially, it was planned that the remaining blazers would fight towards the enemy portals, while the withered remains of the weavers escaped. Something was discovered in the process of storing the soul sand and the bodies brought back from the front lines, however. It was found that if enough souls and dead bodies were placed in close proximity, the souls would merge and come alive into an amalgamation of pain and rage. This creature would attempt to destroy anything it encountered, and despite the questionable nature of using their dead like this, the remaining weavers saw this creature as a valuable asset, a weapon of war. At great loss to the weavers, they would lead this abomination towards the enemy portals, and it would begin to easily tear through the forces of pigmen, eventually making it all the way to the portals. It can only be assumed what happened once it traversed the portals, but given that in quick succession they began to close, the outcome appears obvious. It seems though that the creature did not stop once it was done with the overworlders, for after a great many of the skeletized weavers passed through their own portal, it abruptly closed, cutting off the souls from their bodies on the other side, presumably leading to their deaths. In disbelief, the withered skeletons contemplated their fate. After everything they had gone through, after giving up everything including their own bodies, they were once again trapped in the Nether. From their now dormant portals, thousands of pigmen, without orders from their commanders, ceased their assaults on the Nether fortresses, having either greatly damaged or all out destroyed most of them. Eventually they would simply wander away, trapped and cursed to an eternal life in their rotten bodies by the effects of the Nether. In the end, despite all of their efforts, both the overworlders and those of the Nether had lost everything, and both of their worlds now lay in ruin. One day a portal between them may be opened once more, but by then the wither skeletons will be nothing but a shadow of their past selves, bitter, driven mad by resentment and loss. In the overworld though, survivors of the Wither Abomination's genocide may yet exist, having learned from their lessons and committed themselves to a simple agrarian lifestyle. In case they were ever to forget though, once in a while out in the plains, they may catch a glimpse of a pig that, by 1,000,000 to 1 chance, was struck by lightning, only to be transformed by the latent virus of old into a zombie pigman, and they will remember the errors of their ancestors. They will remember the massive loss of life that resulted, and they will remember to never, under any circumstance, open that doorway again, lest it mean the complete extermination of their kind and invasion of creatures from beyond the twisted folds of space and time. Hi everyone, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did and want to support the channel, then please consider subscribing and hit that bell so that YouTube might possibly inform you when a new video comes out. If you want to go that bit further, please feel free to support the channel on Patreon or go and buy some merchandise on Spreadshirt and Teespring. Links are all down in the description. Other than that, have a great day and I'll see you next time.